Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the education coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest is a local health and fitness coach, Michelle Kester, and she's speaking on the topic of how to end food obsession, binge eating, overeating, and restrictive dieting for good. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us.
Yes, you're welcome. And thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. It's my absolute pleasure to be back here. And hello and welcome to everyone who is here. I am so in gratitude for you being here. And yes, so just so you get an idea, the goal of the presentation here today is really for me to teach you the 3 keys that helped myself to end an over 8-year struggle with binge eating and emotional eating and feeling totally out of control with food, to get to a point where now I have total confidence and peace of mind when it comes to food. It's been that way for the past 5 years. And I've been able to help other people do the same. So I want to teach you how I did that. So if you're wondering, okay, am I in the right place? Is this really for me? This will answer your question. If you can relate to any of these situations, okay, maybe you're the weekend warrior. So maybe you're someone who tries to eat healthy all day long, but then you keep finding yourself having cheat meals or overeating on the weekends or the holidays, or even just on the night after a long day at work. Or maybe you're the snack monster. Maybe you're someone who you just have certain foods that you cannot have in the house, or you're going to eat them all. No matter how hard you try, maybe you have friends and family members who ask to hide those foods so that you won't eat them. Or maybe you've been chronically dieting and you're tired of going on short-term diets that really just don't last for you, keep ending up at the same place over and over again, and you're tired of that. Or maybe you're someone who you are tired of feeling guilty every time that you just want to have a treat, want to eat out with friends, want to eat some ice cream. You're tired of that guilt that's always there and you want to get rid of it. Or you're someone who just wants to learn how to quickly and efficiently stop binge eating, stop emotional eating without having to go through years and years of therapy, or without actually giving up maybe on your health and fitness goals, or just relying on sheer willpower, which if you've tried that before, you've probably noticed doesn't really work, doesn't last. So if any of those are something you relate to, then you're in the right place. So a little bit more about me. Again, my name is Michelle, and I'm a health and wellness coach. About 4.5 years ago, I ended my own struggle with binge eating. And since then, I developed a process, and that's based on my own experience, as well as working with clients to help them overcome binge eating and mentoring with some world-class coaches and health experts. So now, with that process, I've been able to help over a dozen other men and women go from years or even decades of struggling with binge eating, with emotional eating, with overeating, with yo-yo dieting, or maybe just obsessing with food and feeling shame about their bodies, to getting to a place where they have a healthy and positive relationship with food and exercise, where they keep up their healthy habits long-term without having to have someone looming over their shoulder all the time. And I've also helped dozens of men and women have breakthroughs in their health and fitness just overall. So whether that's running the longest distance they ever have in their life, or building muscle, building strength, being able to get up off the floor and chase after their kids way easier, falling in love with exercise for the first time and actually feeling like they want to go to the gym, or finding a way to lose weight in a way that's actually healthy and sustainable, and many more things along those lines. So that's me. That's where I'm at now, but it has not always been this way. Okay. Just a few years ago, I was in a similar place to probably, I think, many of you. And it was really about 12 years ago when I was in the most frustrating place, because it was when I was struggling the worst with binge eating, but it was also when I was trying my very hardest to be as healthy as I could be. So a day in the life of Michelle would look something like I would start off the day with really great intentions. I would eat healthy food. I would keep my portions small all day. But then sometime around 4 or 5 p.m.-ish, it was like I transformed into an entirely different person. I did not care about all the promises I'd made to myself. I did not care about eating healthy anymore. And all I just wanted to do was binge. And so at the end of the day, I'd find myself in my room alone, just eating bowls and bowls of ice cream, cereal, peanut butter, anything I could really get my hands on. I didn't care if it was healthy or unhealthy. Okay. So how did I finally break that cycle? First of all, I want to share with you actually a couple of things that I tried that didn't work. And I want to share these with you because I don't want you to actually make the same mistakes that I did and end up wasting your time. Because these things costed me years. Okay. So along my journey, I hit several what you might call rock bottom moments where I tried different solutions. And I should pause here to say that I think rock bottom moments are a little bit overrated, because if you have a rock bottom moment and you're like, yeah, I'm going to change, but you don't have the right solution, it doesn't really matter. So I had 3 rock bottom moments that I'll share with you today. So the first one was when I was a freshman in college, and I had gained what people call the freshman 15, if you're familiar. And I was at the time using food to cope with anxiety, with fear, with my loneliness of living on my own for the first time, with procrastination and putting things off. I was using it for all of these emotions. And there was this particular moment when I was in my dorm room lying on the floor. I had procrastinated all night long, avoiding writing out this essay that was due at midnight. And I remember clearly at 11:58 p.m., I finally hit the send button for that essay to turn it in. And then I just let out this big sigh of relief, but I looked around me and there were all of these empty wrappers, empty Pop-Tart wrappers, all these things that I had eaten. My stomach felt bloated. I felt sick. And I thought to myself, I can't keep going like this. Not only did I barely finish this essay, but I feel absolutely sick. If I keep going down this route, I'm going to keep gaining weight, getting sicker, getting unhealthier. So I wasn't okay with that. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start running. That's healthy, right? I'll start running. So I did start running, and it helped me lose weight. And I actually lost that freshman 15 and more. But it didn't help me with the binge eating. In fact, it made it worse. Eventually, because I was more active than before, I actually started binging even more food. Okay, so that was the first rock bottom moment and the first solution that didn't work. The second time it happened was a couple years later. I had one of those days where I was like, okay, today's the day I'm going to stop binge eating. And I had thrown out all of the possible foods I could binge in my house. But again, around 4 or 5 p.m., I was standing there alone in the kitchen, and I didn't care anymore about all the promises that I'd made. I reached into the cupboard and I pulled out my housemate's box of cereal and I started eating it. And in that moment, I was so ashamed and so embarrassed. I thought, what am I doing stealing my roommate's food? Like, what's wrong with me? And so again, I hit a rock bottom and I decided, okay, I need someone to watch over me and hold me accountable and prevent me from overeating. And so I asked my boyfriend at the time to please prevent me from eating other people's food or too much of my own. But again, it worked for a little bit, but the truth was he couldn't watch me 24/7. And I actually developed a habit of eating when he wasn't watching. I started hiding and making it even more of a shameful secret thing that I did. So again, that solution didn't work. A few years later, I had another rock bottom moment. This time I was out of college. I had actually become a personal trainer. I was really good at it too. I was good at helping people with exercise. But inside, I felt like a fraud because despite all of that, I still struggled with binge eating. And so I asked a colleague at the time and a friend who was also a personal trainer to make a deal with me. I told her I'd give her $50 for every time that I binged. So long story short, after I gave her a few $100s, I realized, well, okay, that's not working either. So this really went on like this for years and years. And honestly, after so many times failing to get rid of this problem, there were months and there were actually even years where I actually just ignored the problem. I kind of just denied that it was there. And I would make up for what I overate. I would run super long distances. I was running like 50 miles a week. I was working out 6 to 7 days per week. I was counting calories. I was working out through injury. I was trying to make sure that I made up for every single little extra thing that I ate. And so I wouldn't gain weight, but it was for all of the struggle. People say, okay, you can't exercise away your diet. I did. I did, but there was a cost to it, right? There was a huge cost. And the cost was I looked fit and healthy on the outside, but I felt like a fraud on the inside. And I couldn't trust myself. Like I needed someone to watch over my every move day and night to keep me just from overeating or eating something I didn't want to. And I would continue to procrastinate and not deal with my emotions. I procrastinated on things that I wanted to get done, and I just barely scraped by. I felt like it was stealing my life away because I was constantly worrying about what I was going to eat, when I was going to exercise, how I was going to make up for the binge I had last night. It took up so much time, energy, headspace. And it was really making my life smaller and smaller. So I have a question for you here. And if you have a notepad or paper at this time, this is a great time to journal some notes. But I just want you to answer this question for you. What is binge eating or emotional eating or overeating? What is it costing you? What is it costing you? So I'll let you think about that for a moment. So now you know what didn't work. We're going to get to what actually turned this around. So I have another question for you. Maybe you're like me. Are any of you like me? You're the kind of person who would do way more for others than you would ever do for yourself. And maybe you can just give a little head nod if that's you. Most of you don't have your cameras on. That's totally fine, but just acknowledge it. That's you. That was me. And so, like I said, I was a trainer. And I remember one day my boss at the time asked me if I would please start helping clients with their eating, with their nutrition. And up until that point, I had gotten by in my career focusing solely on exercise because I thought, "Okay, how can I help them with food if I cannot help myself?" And so, but when he asked me that day, I had a bit of an epiphany. I realized I needed support. And so I hired myself a coach. And I'll tell you, this coach didn't specialize in binge eating, but what she did know was how to help me change the way I was thinking. And so her strategy was very simple. First of all, she used some common sense to help me see a few things that I was doing that actually creating this problem, like undereating in the daytime and ending up binge eating later, and several other things like that. Second of all, she taught me about how the brain works and how I could separate my conscious thoughts from my automatic binge eating thoughts. And then the third thing was she helped me just by holding me accountable, being there with me every single step of the way, cheering me on until I got to a point where I was independent and could do it on my own. So as a result, in 3 months' time, I had stopped binge eating and I never looked back. Since then, I've been able to learn even more about what actually caused my binge eating in the first place. And over the past 5 years, I've learned about what's worked for me and what's worked for my clients. So that now actually some of my clients, actually many of them, have been able to stop binge eating in a matter of like 2 to 4 weeks rather than 3 whole months. Okay, so now binge eating is great. I mean, stopping binge eating is great. But I think what's even better is what replaces it when it's gone. So what I mean by that is once I stopped binge eating, I was able to do so many things that it had been preventing me from doing. I was able to, for example, start working on healing my gut. I had IBS, chronic IBS, and I was able to go on some sort of restrictive or particular diets in order to heal that without ever fearing that I was going to self-sabotage or overeat or go back to binge eating. I was able to have the confidence and trust in myself to not just follow through on my exercise and my healthy eating, but also that built on my whole confidence. So I stepped forward in my career. I started my own business. I would never have done that before. I wouldn't have had that energy, headspace, and confidence to do that. I was started dealing with the emotional issues that I'd been numbing with food. I stopped procrastinating, for example, and I started dealing with the anxiety that I had underneath that. So I have yet another question for you. And really, I want you to actually ask this question to yourself and write it down. Get this out of your head. Get something out of this today. So here's the question. What could you accomplish if food, exercise, dieting were no longer a problem for you in your life? If you just had them in the bag, what could you do? You might not come up with all of it right now, but just take a moment to brainstorm a little bit. Many of the clients that I've worked with, when I ask them this question, they have to take a moment because they never even thought about what it could even look like without that problem, without being on diets their entire life. I'll give you a second. See some familiar names in here. That's cool. Okay, so the agenda for the rest of our time together here is I'm going to teach you those 3 keys that were in the end really what made all of the difference for me. They're what I wish I would have known as I went through the journey of struggling with binge eating and trying to stop. And they're not just what my coach taught me, they're also what I've learned since then through my work with my clients and helping them to overcome this same issue again and again and again. So if you can do these 3 things, you can save yourself years trying to solve this through diets and books and other programs. Okay, so teaching number 1, get out your pens and papers. Teaching number 1 is, there is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. So give you a little backstory. I'll explain. Again, I told you how I felt like there was this other person inside of me that just didn't care about all the healthy eating I wanted to do. It felt like I had to sort of fight this monster. But the more I fought, the more I failed. It just didn't work to fight that. And so it won't work for you either. So the reason that doesn't work is because of the way that our brains work. I'll give you an example. If I tell you, all right, starting tomorrow, you can no longer eat ice cream. No more ice cream. What is the first thing you want to do when you get off of this meeting? Don't you want to just eat a bunch of ice cream? You're not going to be able to eat it ever again. There's nothing wrong with you there. That's human nature. We want to rebel and we have this Last Supper fear mentality. So that's one example. Here's another example. If I tell you, what do you think about if I say, don't think about a purple elephant? I'm going to bet most of you just saw a purple elephant in your imagination. That's just what your brain is built to do. Okay, so what do you do instead of fighting yourself? Well, maybe you've heard this before. Seek first to understand. Stop trying to fight yourself. Stop trying to hyper control that part of you that wants to overeat or emotional eat or binge, and actually try to start understanding it. Let me tell you, once I did this, I went from that feeling of just being confused, like, what's wrong with me? Why did I do that? Why do I keep doing this? To actually being able to distinguish my thoughts. I could start to understand why I was doing that, actually, why I was thinking the things that I was, why I was kept going back to certain foods. And that came from understanding and awareness, not force. So, and this is where, as a result, I started to see myself stopping eating when I was full, leaving food on the plate, not because I had to, not because I had the will to, just because I wanted to. So it's not just about willpower. It's not, I just need to try harder or get enough people to prevent me from doing what I don't want to do. Instead, it's understanding why you're doing what you're doing, and then making a clear and conscious choice from awareness, non-judgment. So to get yourself started on this, I have a couple of prompt questions you can start to use. So you can journal these out if you're writing things down. Here are some questions. Why do I do what I do? The tone here is key. It's not, why do I keep doing this? It's, why do I do that? Why do I feel the drive to binge? Why do I want to overeat? Why am I associating food with a way to deal with this emotion? How am I actually creating this problem? So as you think that through, I just want to give you a couple more examples outside of just my own life, but in the lives of my clients and how this has worked for them. So I had a client, her name was Rachel, and she had spent her entire life in and out of diets. Her mom put her on one when she was a little kid. And so weight loss was the struggle of her life. She would often eat really well on diets. She felt like she would eat perfectly, quote unquote. But then, for whatever reason, when she would hit a certain mark, around 10 to 20 pounds of weight loss, then she would want to binge. And she would just think, screw it all, and gain all the weight back. So when we started working together, I asked her, what are you thinking about when you get to that point? When you get to that 10 to 20 pounds lost, what do you think? She said, well, I think I've reached that goal, so now I deserve a break. Okay, red flag there, guys. If you need a break, the process you were following was not one that will last. You didn't want to do it in the first place. So together, she and I created a plan that she actually wanted to follow. So as a result, in 2 weeks, not only did she stop binge eating without fighting herself or willing herself or getting on a diet, but she started creating healthy ways of making foods that she loved. She started doing that on her own terms, coming up with new recipes and ideas. She was really actually enjoying it. A few weeks later, she did the same thing with her exercise. She found fun ways to exercise. She just started dancing. She invited her friends to start doing it with her. So as of now, it's almost a year later, and she's still keeping it up. She even brought some friends in to join her. Okay. Here's another example. Another client I work with. When we started working together, she was in her 50s. Her name is Karen. And she was a runner, actually an ultra runner, very disciplined lady. She was a mom of 2, really quite fit and active. And when we met, she had just gotten off a 3-year program with a personal trainer and a group where she had said she had ate perfectly and she did really well. She felt really good about how much weight she lost, how good she looked. But when that 3 years was over and she didn't have the community around her and the coach, she went to what she called Screw-Itville. And that place was where she would eat bags and bags of chips every night. And she couldn't go to birthday parties because she was afraid she would eat all of the cake. So she came to me desperately asking me, please hold me accountable. But rather than just hold her accountable, because she'd had that before, similar to Rachel, I thought, okay, this is kind of weird. Karen is this smart, disciplined lady. She's a runner. She's a lawyer. Like, what's going on that when she's left to her own devices, she's going to this Screw-Itville? That's weird. So together, we dug a little bit in. We looked at some of the rules she had around food. We looked at her judgments about weight and people who she felt had let themselves go. We looked at her exercise rules and what she felt like she needed to do to maintain a healthy body. We started allowing some of the foods that she didn't allow, like cake and wine, and changing the way she thought about herself and others when they gained weight. As a result, in 4 weeks' time, she didn't feel the need to or want to eat whole bags of chips at night. She went to a birthday party, had a slice of cake, and was done. No more binge eating. And then in 12 weeks later, she actually started losing weight without strict dieting, without a whole community looking over her shoulder. But I think the best thing is she told me for the first time in her life, she felt like she loved her body the way it is, even without having lost the weight. All right, so that's teaching number 1. Moving along to teaching number 2. So self-trust can be learned. It's something that you can learn. Let me tell you, when I was a kid, I felt like there were certain things that I struggled with that I was just like born with. There were things like being shy or quiet, being a procrastinator, being non-athletic. They were just things I thought were who I was. So maybe you have things like that. You're just like, that's just who I am. Fortunately, I was personally blessed by being surrounded by several mentors who taught me that anything can be learned and I actually can change if there's something that isn't serving me. So little by little, I learned how to actually change some of those things that I actually felt like weren't serving me. For example, one of those things was feeling like I was shy and quiet. When I became a personal trainer, I realized that wasn't going to work for me anymore because I had clients who needed to be able to hear me. Now, let me tell you, it was hard to get loud enough, but I managed to do it with the help and support of someone who helped me learn how to bring my voice out. Another thing I needed was to be athletic. I did not start out athletic, but I knew that I could change that through learning a skill. And I became relatively athletic, and then someone wanted me to become a trainer. So I did. So experiences like these taught me that anything can be learned. So this is one thing that I had in my favor when it comes to our struggles with food, emotional eating, binge eating, being someone who's just can't control themselves around sugary things. People talk about this stuff as if it's just who they are. Like, you're just going to have to manage these triggers or these bad qualities about yourself for the rest of your life. But honestly, I think that's a load of BS. Because when I struggled with my control around food, I knew, this is why I kept trying. I knew that all I needed to do was learn a skill. I just hadn't learned it yet. And that skill was trusting myself around food. So now, once I learned the skill of trusting myself around all food, I no longer had to worry about getting too hungry, getting too emotional, getting too bored, being around crackers and junk food, because I could trust myself to control my behavior in any of those situations. So again, the teaching here is you can actually learn to build trust in yourself around food. And how do you do that? Is probably your next question. How do I do that? So it's a little like building something like courage. How do you build courage? You just be courageous, right? In small steps, through practice. You go out, you do something courageous, and that builds your courage. So the problem that many people face is that they'll actually avoid foods like cake, ice cream, crackers, cookies that they don't trust themselves around. They hyper control themselves around those things. And so they never actually get a chance to learn how to trust themselves, to actually practice it. I mean, if you think about like a relationship, for example, if you hyper control your partner, how well do you think that's going to build trust? Not very well, right? Same thing goes with food. So, and by the way, this is something that you can technically get away with not dealing with and still be able to stop binge eating, still be able to lose weight, for example, but you'll end up making your life smaller and smaller because you'll be relying on willpower, control, or someone else looking over your shoulder. You'll be avoiding different triggers. You'll have to avoid cake. You'll have to be careful to not get too hungry or too busy or too stressed. You might continue to be scared of the holidays. But if you build self-trust, then you can expand your life because you get your power back. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. You can have a holiday and not worry about how you're going to gain weight or eat way too much. All right. So I'll share with you again a couple of client stories about building self-trust. So first one was my client. Her name was Marissa, and she was a college counselor. She had just gotten into a serious relationship when we met, and she wanted to feel like she could not have to have this shameful secret of binge eating when she got into this relationship. So it was really important to her. And she had a certain trigger food, and that was Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So with this food, she would make sure that she didn't buy it at the grocery store. She didn't have it in the house. But over and over, at the end of the day, a long day at work, she ended up ordering it, Ubering it to herself online, and just binging it. So it was more expensive. She was Ubering it in, and she was eating way too much of it. So when she started working with me, after doing some work on her thinking and her mindset around food, I actually encouraged her to start buying Ben & Jerry's ice cream when she went grocery shopping instead of avoiding it. As a result, 2 weeks after we had her go do that, we got on a coaching call, and I was like, hey, how's that Ben & Jerry's doing? And she says, you know what? It's not even as good as I remember. It's just been sitting in the freezer for the last 2 weeks. I think I had a bite when I got it, but I forgot about it after that. Again, this is the power of self-trust. You can have trigger foods in the house and have total control. Okay, here's another story. Maggie was a cook. She's an auntie. She's a mom. She had just lost a bunch of weight. I think she'd lost well over 60 pounds when we met using an app called Noom. Maybe you've heard of it. And she'd used Noom and she'd hit a sort of plateau, she felt like, because she still struggled with binge eating. Now, mind you, Maggie was absolutely amazing. Before we met, she had also overcome alcoholism, overcome drug addiction, and now she was ready to overcome binge eating. But she told me that actually she felt like overcoming binge eating was harder because she couldn't just go cold turkey. Food was always going to be there, especially since she was a cook. So she had to build self-trust. Okay, so what we did is we started looking at some of the rules she'd been following in the Noom app, for example. We started allowing some things that really just didn't need to be restricted. We started allowing foods that she'd been limiting and changing the way she thought about healthy eating and her body. As a result, she could do things that she couldn't do before. Like, for example, she had a couple Oreos and didn't eat the whole package for the first time in a very long time. She was able to throw out leftovers after work instead of just eating the leftovers because of all the guilt she felt about that and just feeling out of control. Now, Maggie has not binged in months and months. She eats a healthy diet that she's proud of. She exercises regularly because she wants to. And what I think is particularly cool is she actually started even an online community where she helps people who use Noom learn how to use it in a way that's healthy and doesn't lead to binge eating. So, self-trust. This is the power of it. All right, moving on to teaching number 3. Support and sharing. Break the cycle of shame. So for this one, let me remind you that I spent years and years trying to stop binge eating all by myself. I didn't want help because I was supposed to be the best. I was a personal trainer. I shouldn't need help with my eating. And so I read books on addiction. I took programs online. I did group courses that I was able to sort of hide in the background in. I tried many different diets. I tried doing it on my own for 8 years. And I kept it a secret. I told maybe a few spare people that were really close, but they were also people who didn't get it, who didn't know anything about what was going on, who almost didn't believe it because, heck, I looked fit. And so I kept wondering what was wrong with me. I felt so much shame. I felt so much embarrassment. But fortunately, one day, a mentor of mine shared with me something that really helped me see things differently. He told me this: you can't wait to feel worthy. You have to act worthy, and then you'll feel worthy. So in other words, you have to treat yourself worthy in order to actually experience feeling worthy. So I heard that. I was like, I get it. I need help and I need to show myself I'm worth that. So I hired that coach. I knew I couldn't hide this anymore. I had to be vulnerable. I had to share what was going on with someone who actually got it and could help. I needed to put some more skin in the game for a longer period of time. So, and by the way, those were all things that I would only do if I actually chose to act worthy instead of ashamed. So the teaching here, support is vital. It's not just for accountability. It's for the power of what happens when you no longer keep it to yourself, when you no longer just hold on to that shame and embarrassment. So what getting support did for me is it shifted my mindset from, God, I hope this will work, to this has to work. It got me from, this is shameful, this is embarrassing, and I should have it all together, to, it's okay. I'm worthy of help. It took me from, or it got me to a place of having the power of human connection with someone who saw me and was willing to help me carry through. So these days, I'm constantly giving myself support in ways that pay off, because that paid off so much. I'm a personal trainer and I have my own trainer. I hire experts to help me with my health all the time. I go to my doctors for support with my health. I hired a coach to help me get my business going. And these things have gotten me to places I would never have gotten on my own. Okay, but it's not just about me. I'll share with you a couple client stories for this third teaching here. I had a client, her name was Teresa, and she was a bodybuilder. In fact, she was like at 11% body fat when we met. She was a fitness coach. And she had so much shame because underneath that, she was obsessed with food. She was unhappy. She wasn't dating because she didn't feel good about her body. And she couldn't control herself when she had snacks in front of her. And so she was trying all this time to be this role model, be positive, while inside she was hurting. And she had it kept a secret. So really for her, when she hired me, when we started working together, it was already a huge step forward in breaking the cycle of shame and secrecy for her. We started connecting and sharing. She felt heard. She started to learn that there was nothing wrong with her. And actually, she instantly stopped binge eating as soon as we started working together. Now, mind you, 2 weeks in, she binged again. But this is again the power of support. This time, she didn't have to worry. Instead of just thinking, oh my God, this means that I'm never going to stop. I'm going to keep binge eating. I'm a failure. Together, we just got to get together and address it and learn something more that helped her get to stopping binge eating for the long run. So what we learned was she had been underfueling at certain times of the day, which was lunch. And she had also people bringing in sweets at work all the time at lunchtime. So that would end up being her binge eating hour. So we did a couple of things, started fueling her better around lunchtime, allowing some sweets, and the cravings just started to fade away, and she stopped binge eating. This time, it didn't come back. So a few months later, it was actually 5 months later, she called me up, actually. We had not been working together for a couple of months anymore. And she called me up just to tell me how happy she was. She's like, I'm dating again. I don't binge. I found a new fitness community where I'm no longer focusing on just looking good, but I'm actually focusing on just having fun and getting stronger. She said, I gained 2 pounds of muscle because I've been eating enough now. So this is what can happen. Again, when you break that cycle of shame, get vulnerable, start sharing, connecting with other people about this, getting the support that you need. Okay, so I'll give you a little recap here. Hopefully you've been writing some notes. The first teaching was there is nothing wrong with you. Understand, seek first to understand, not to fight yourself. Number 2, trust can be built in yourself around food. You do not have to have a small life where you fear the holidays. And number 3, support breaks the cycle of shame. All right, so we haven't talked today yet about the behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs that are keeping you specifically individually stuck. We haven't talked about the specific things that you can start doing to build your trust in yourself around food, or what it means for you to get support. So that's why I'm offering a free 60-minute call to every one of you today. I'll help you clarify exactly what thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors are keeping you stuck fighting yourself. And I'll help you start actually coming from a place of understanding so you can break free from the cycle of self-sabotage and start creating the healthy habits that you really want to do. And again, if you're not aware of what's actually driving you to emotionally eat, to binge eat, to overeat, it's just going to be an endless battle of fighting yourself. You might lose some weight. You might eat perfectly, quote unquote, like Karen did for 3 years. But then it always ends up going back to the same. You can ignore the problem, but at the cost of your feeling like a fraud, not being able to trust yourself around food, continuing to put off all of the things that this has been stopping you from doing, continuing to lose that energy and space, headspace and time. So in order for us to address your individual struggles, we have to talk on an individual level, just like my coach did with me. And in order to get clear on exactly what you need to end your struggles with food and diet forever, you can set up this free call with me here today. So how do you book that call? I'm going to share with you my phone number. All you need to do is shoot me a text with your number one, your name, and number two, which of the 3 teachings from today spoke to you the most. Okay. And then we'll set up a time for that free 60-minute call. So my phone number, I'll also put it, I think, in the chat. I'll put it in the chat so that you see it as well. So it's 253-273-7045. You can text me there with your name and one of the 3 teachings that spoke to you the most. If you prefer email, or if you're out of country or something like that, which I've worked with people like that, instead, my email is michekester@gmail.com. Put that in the chat for you here as well. And again, what we do on this call is we clarify your individual thoughts, behaviors, and beliefs that have been driving you to binge eat, to overeat, emotionally eat. And I'll teach you how you can actually start to understand and reverse those. And that's important because without knowing these things, you'll just continue trying hard to control yourself and fight yourself. And that's just not sustainable. So that's why I'm offering this free 60-minute call. I'll teach you how to end binge eating and yo-yo dieting and emotional eating for good. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to talking to some of you. That's all I have for you today. We'll give it a minute here if anyone wants to ask a question or anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. And that's how generous of you to offer that free 60-minute consultation. So everyone, who has been here this evening and who will watch the replay will be able to further take this knowledge that they've learned tonight and make those changes possible, because it is possible. And thank you for being an inspirational community member, and your time tonight and everyone's time tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely. So welcome. Yeah, I'm seeing a couple of thank yous. Awesome. You're welcome. And a thank you to Elizabeth. Yes, thanks to Elizabeth for putting this on. Oh my goodness.
My absolute pleasure. Oh yeah, and there was someone that clapped too with the little
I saw that clap. Thank you for the clap.
So cute.
Good. We'll give it a minute in case anyone has questions.
Yeah.
Michelle Anderson, you planned a call? Great. Yeah, just shoot me a message and we'll set up a time.
Aw, you have a good evening too. Hey. Yeah, I think the teaching 2, it just went right out of my head.
Are you trying to remember what it was?
Yes.
Self-trust.
Yes, the
learn.
self-trust. Yes. Yeah, I think like how you were explaining, a lot of people, are like, I'm going to do this for myself, and I totally got this. And then somehow that repetitive pattern of habit gets the best of them and their willpower. But working with you will help people get to the root cause of why it keeps repeating.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's like if you keep trying something, especially if it's like more than 3 months or years, then there's something there. And if we can just dig a little bit and uncover what that is, you can break the cycle. You absolutely can. So
Yay!
sometimes it takes 2 times digging, but we'll get there. Let's see, I'm writing those down. Subject. Well, if anyone doesn't have any questions.
I think
Okay.
we're good to go here. I'm going to stop